So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Down the Rabbit Hole. Here today, we've got a really great, fascinating conversation with Nick Westlake from Offchain Labs, the creators or the team behind some of the technology behind Arbitrum, which is an L2 on Ethereum that's scaling Ethereum. Wonderful stuff. We decided at the standard.io to launch our borrowing and stablecoin protocol over on Arbitrum because of a whole lot of reasons, actually, mainly because of their great technology, fantastic, really solid technology, great community, a lot of liquidity, a lot of DeFi's are happening over there. But I wanted to dive deep, a little bit deeper in and have Nick on to really explain a little bit more about Arbitrum and dive a little bit into the weeds. Welcome, Nick.
What's going on? I appreciate the invitation to come up and chat, Joshua. I'm very excited to have the conversation here today. Chatting basically everything Arbitrum, right? I'm happy to field any questions and hopefully educate some of your listeners on the network.
Yeah, awesome. For those that are like Bitcoin maxis and they're just diving a little bit into Ethereum, one thing that I really like about the Ethereum space, coming over from me coming over from the Bitcoin space, from the entire scaling debate and the toxicity that happened out of there and the mudslinging, and a lot of people that ended up on like Bitcoin Cash or even Bitcoin SV, and they're like, no, L1's the only way, like main chain. A lot of those people then they head over to Ethereum, and it's quite normal to think about L2s and even L3s in the Ethereum space. It's just not something people brawl about. They just like, let's get on with it. Let's build some cool layer 2s. And then they come back to Bitcoin. They're like, oh yeah, now Lightning makes more sense. I understand it now. How do you see that relationship?
What an esoteric question, right?
Yeah, I just thought I thought I'd start with craziness. Like, do you see that as well? That there's that people are a little bit more open within the Arbitrum and Ethereum space in general?
Yeah. I would even say like more EVM chains as well, right? Like I don't know. I've been in this game now quite a bit, right? And Bitcoin has evolved into this obscure. I wouldn't even say obscure, just its own little community. Whereas, and this is just my perception and my observed realities, right? Is they've transformed themselves into like this secular mob, if you will, where it does sometimes seem where they don't want to innovate, or they want to get folks quote unquote shit coins, altcoins, right? They want to get those out because there'll be more bid for Bitcoin, et cetera, et cetera. However, in saying that, I think there's two realms of cryptography and crypto, Web3, blockchain, the whole nine yards, right? And one of the reasons I like Bitcoin so much is that it is simple. At least as it sits right now, like it's simple. It has a predefined goal, or like mission, if you will, and it's has set out on that mission for quite some time. Versus Ethereum, where when I first got introduced to Ethereum, and I read the white paper and kind of was speculating on what could be built on top of it and things of that nature, right? It's like, okay, well, this to me seems more like an operating system versus where Bitcoin doesn't, to me, in that sense. And again, that's just my perceived observations, etc. But in saying that, over the last several months, where we've seen with like ordinals, even like actual quote unquote coins, BTC altcoins being standards being built, et cetera, et cetera. I think I think a lot of that too is from newer quote unquote newer generations that are curious and want to optimize, want to innovate, want to see push the limits on what can be done, versus Ethereum, which has held that ethos, I guess you could say, for quite some time now, right? And it's not only Ethereum, it's Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, Solana, Avalanche. Like it's these EVM compatible chains where it's also quite easier, I guess, quote unquote easier. Depends on what your definition of easy is, but to actually develop platforms, dApps, things of that nature on EVM compatible chains versus, you know, the Bitcoin blockchain itself or the Lightning Network, etc. But there's always been, you know, to your point, like that sense of perhaps, especially, you know, over the last several, we'll even call it the last several years now at this point, it's just all times melted together. But, you know, with the whole CeFi meltdowns and, you know, the bear market, the whole 9 yards, it's like sense of camaraderie almost, in a sense. Obviously you still have the, you know, tit for tats, my chain's the best, no, my chain's the best, etc., etc. But I think that is not foolish, but, you know, as interoperability and as this technology matures, in a sense, right, like that fragmentation that we see now, I think will start to minimize, right? And you'll be able to, you know, seamlessly transact on multiple blockchains, and you won't even know that you're doing it, etc., etc. um, um, yeah, but in saying that, right, it's like Bitcoin is coming around, I guess you could say, the corner. You know, their community, their holders, etc. You know, I like to see that they're coming around, and that's kind of my thesis here. But, you know, versus Ethereum, which has kind of had this, you know, like sense of camaraderie, companionship, you know, building together towards one goal for, you know, for quite some time now.
Yeah. I mean, you know, a lot of the Bitcoin mates that I've got from way back, you know, they're like, oh, you know, cool project, but why are you building on Ethereum or an Arbitrum? And I'm like, well, you really can't do what we're doing in Bitcoin. You know, it's just not possible. So, and then they sort of go, oh yeah, okay, I get it. You know, and that's really where I come at it is, okay, we've got great technology that we want to build. What's the best technology stack? And when we looked around, really Arbitrum is phenomenal because it does have those really great primitive building blocks for Ethereum, but then has that large scaling capacity that you're looking for. Let's talk a little bit about scaling. How does, like, fundamentally, how does Arbitrum differ from Ethereum, like its main chain? Like, how does it achieve scale?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? It's like a number of different things, right? So what is, you know, Arbitrum at its heart, right? Like Arbitrum is a layer 2 scaling solution for Ethereum, right? Designed to not only improve the, you know, scalability, efficiency of the Ethereum network itself, right? And the way that, you know, they alleviate, I guess one would say, some of the scalability limitations, and we do this by basically moving some of the transaction and computations off chain, right? Reducing the burden on the mainnet, which in turn enables, you know, faster and cheaper transactions. And the way Arbitrum One works, you know, Arbitrum Nova is a bit different, the way the technology stack, but, you know, at the various highest of high levels, right? Like,
Yeah, let's stick with Arbitrum One just to.
yeah, Arbitrum One compiles transactions, right?
Yeah.
Bundles them up, and then sends them through what we call the sequencer. And the sequencer, you know, gets ran through fraud proofing, the whole 9 yards, making sure that you know, transactions are not malicious. But again, bundles these transactions and then send them up to L1, where they post to the, you know, to the L1 chain itself. And in doing so, you achieve, you know, again, that faster efficiency, the faster scalability, you know, more TPS, et cetera, you know, et cetera. And I mean, without diving again too deep into the technical aspects, one could say is that, again, just some of the aspects of the layer 1, you know, beacon chain one, or whatever you want to call it, you know, are taken off chain. You know, transactions are bundled, and then posted to L1 that achieve this, you know, scalability and efficiency. And just to touch on Nova as well, right? So Arbitrum Nova is built with the AnyTrust tech stack, and think of that almost as like a layer 1 itself, right? It has a data availability community, and ours on Nova are actually public. It's, you know, the likes of Google Cloud, Reddit, OpenSea, QuickNode, some others as well. There's I believe there's 7 of them. And what they do is that they run backend processes to make sure that the transactions are not malicious, right? And in doing so, you achieve even faster finality, cheaper transactions. Most Nova transactions are less than a cent to transact on. And but yeah, so what I'm getting at is that we, you know, Offchain Labs has developed 2 almost technology stacks that enable faster EVM transactions, etc.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Nova is more, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, is more designed for, let's say, gaming, where you just don't want every single chess move to be recorded forever on every decentralized computer running this thing. It sort of finalizes everything and then sends one single transaction at the end, like who won the game or something like that. Maybe not even that to the end. But whereas Arbitrum 1 is really designed to keep everything within, like, it's recorded on the Arbitrum blockchain, but the finality of the block is also then anchored to the main chain.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're basically spot on, right? Like we do foresee Arbitrum Nova as being like kind of that gaming social layer chain, if you will, and that's because of the extremely fast finality, the extremely cost efficient gas transactions, etc. Right? Like if I'm playing an MMO RPG, and for your audience that doesn't know, it's a massively multiplayer online role playing game. Think of RuneScape, World of Warcraft, etc. Where if it's truly on-chain gaming and not just browser gaming in that sense, right? Like you're gonna have a lot of transactions happen at once, right?
Yeah.
Or not even at once, but in succession with each other, a large volume amount of them, etc. And that's exactly what Arbitrum Nova is built for, right? At one point they did more transactions than Ethereum mainnet, actually, for the Damn Pirate Society launch just a couple of months ago. At this point, I think they did over 1 million transactions, and the chain was not congested. The gas stayed the same, and it was like kind of a not tested production, but like a what's the word I'm looking for? A stress test, if you will, for the chain itself. And yeah, but in saying that as well, like a DeFi protocol could very well go and build on Nova. It's a permissionless network, right? In that sense, but the way we're it's positioned is for those games, that social layer, and then
I think it's, you sort of sacrifice a little bit of security,
you do
a tiny bit, and that's kind of why you say, look, it's not the end of the world if we don't record every move of this chess game or some game, whereas it could be the end of the world if there's a whole lot of total value locked in some DeFi product and someone takes
that's fair to
advantage of it.
say. Yes,
that's
so very fair to say.
Maximize security, and that's why Arbitrum 1 is what it is. But yeah, it's a really fascinating, and I think this is really an interesting direction that these L2s are going. Like Polygon's taking on a whole bunch of different scaling mechanisms. So are you guys, in terms of use cases. What are the use cases? And I think that's a really, really clever way to go in terms of technology stacks, because at the end of the day, I really see it as, no matter what scaling solution we have, humans have an insatiable appetite for block space, and if we just stay cheap the whole time, then something has to give somewhere, because someone is just going to dump everything they possibly can onto it just for lols. So we do need a price, and we do need multiple levels of this stuff. So it's really cool, and I really take my hat off to what you guys have chosen, which direction you want to take. Hey, in terms of the ZK side of things, is Offchain Labs or Arbitrum looking at incorporating maybe some of the zero knowledge proof, or are you guys going to mainly stick with wholeheartedly the optimistic settlement?
It's a really good question, right? And one that is frequently asked to us, right? And obviously Arbitrum 1 is an optimistic rollup built on optimistic technology, but in saying that, we are a team of engineers, core Ethereum devs, core Arbitrum devs, both at the same time, and most definitely exploring different types of technology, including ZK tech, I should say, to scale the technology even more, right? Like there was a prior there's Arbitrum Classic, which was like the first mainnet iteration, right? Now we're on Arbitrum Nitro, if you will. That's the next iteration, right? And who knows what the next or thereafter that what those iterations look like, right? And I think people always go, well, ZK versus optimism, or optimistic, ZK versus optimistic, right? And it's I think as it sits right now, they're both very newer technology stacks, if you will, that are exploring the same types of use cases at the same time. And when I say that, I mean, like, if you go over to ZK, Sync Era or whatever, like, I still have DeFi protocols there, right? Like, I have money markets, I've got perpetual exchanges, DEXs, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that's not the best use case for ZK role or ZK technology, right? It's again very much in its infancy, or who even knows to say, like, maybe the DeFi tech isn't good on optimism, on the optimistic stack, et cetera, right? It's just like these are very new technology stacks that are just experimenting and exploring in real time, that we see it each and every day. But again, I don't think this is a zero-sum game whatsoever. I think there's use cases for different types of technology that will extrapolate over time as we mature, not only as an industry but also as the technology itself evolves, and everything that kind of goes into that as well.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really been shown that network effect and liquidity is more important than the latest technological stack. In fact, I mean, this sort of example has been trumped out a lot, where you see Betamax versus VHS. For those that are old enough to remember, Beta was a smaller tape, it was a smaller cassette, better sound quality, better picture quality, but it didn't take off because the porn industry had adopted VHS, and so all these people around the world had bought these VHS players. And so Sony missed out on that, and even though it was a better technology, they'd missed that network effect that people already had bought that hardware already. And now software is a bit different in terms of network effect, because the switching cost isn't that much. If you want to switch to a different technology, there's not as much cost to that if it's a software. But nevertheless, liquidity is one of these very, very sticky things. And Arbitrum have done a great job in garnering and gathering liquidity from in terms of layer twos, especially in DeFi. What are some of the reasons, do you think, that so much liquidity has headed towards Arbitrum?
Yeah, good question, right? I mean, I think it's a factor of both, to your point, network effects, but then also just like, I don't even think this is a word, but easeability, which I guess translates to accessibility, right? And for a couple of reasons. The Arbitrum bridge, the canonical bridge that we have, is very easy to get from L1 to L2. From L2 to L1, again, has that 7-day grace period, but from L1 to L2 is less than 15 minutes to take a bridge. So it's quite accessible, and it's quite easy to actually transfer, your liquidity from L1 mainnet, which is, as you and I both know, like the liquidity on-chain hub, over to L2 quite quickly. And then to build on that, right? Like, I'm sure you and your audience have transacted on L1 mainnet, right? And other EVM compatible chains as well, right? The front ends basically all kind of act the same. Obviously, the back ends are a bit different, but in terms of Arbitrum, both the front end and the back end, in a sense, they act the same way, right? Because it's a layer 2 roll up to the L1. And in saying that, it's just like the first time I transacted on Arbitrum, I remember I was like, this is what I feel Ethereum should be, meaning fast, cheaper, in comparison to L1 fees. But like, it's exactly what I thought. I think a lot of other folks kind of feel the same way as well, where like, okay, this is what I want Ethereum mainnet to be. I want it to be fast. I want it to be cheap. I want it to be quick, safe, secure, the whole 9 yards, which embodies the Arbitrum One network in that sense. And then I have to give it off to the folks that are building on our chain too, right? Like I don't like to name specific names, but in this instance I will. Like GMX has turned into this monster of a protocol where they started out on the BSC chain, and then made the switch over to Arbitrum because of that inherent security layer that Arbitrum does have in conjunction with L1. And they that network effect that you kind of mentioned before, right? Like GMX kind of started that, where they had this super novel product, primitive GLP, the dual tokenomic system where passively make markets on their exchange, which gave not only folks like you and me, or a regular retail user who absolutely cannot make markets in the general sense, right? But still are able to through this GLP product by collecting actual quote unquote real yield. So not Ponzi emissions or anything of that nature. It's actually paid back in Ethereum from the trading fees of the exchange. And from there, kind of just extrapolated out. Like you had folks come start building on top of GMX. The liquidity started to come. So then you caught the attention of money markets, things of that nature. And I'm speaking specifically in the DeFi realm, right? And then it kind of just, again, extrapolated out from there. And then in terms of like our other verticals, like gaming, you had Treasure DAO come in and like, they were one of the first on the network, if you will. And they, weren't a DeFi protocol. This was all very new. Like, okay, we're going to be a gaming studio in the sense of, a year and a half ago, you're playing DeFi Kingdoms, right? And even more than that, 2 years ago. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but they called them, it was a quote unquote game, but what it really was at heart was a glorified, gamified yield farm, right? Whereas Treasure DAO actually put out fostered actual, playable games. And that also had its own kind of network effects, maybe not in sense of liquidity, but in sense of a new onset of different types of users who, maybe aren't interested in financial markets or, financial primitives and, don't want to transact really on chain, but but they're interested in blockchain and they, this new gaming stuff, right? I own my in-game items, the whole 9 yards, ownership of not only my data, but also, my assets, et cetera. And again, that had its own network effects in terms of bringing a new onslaught of different types of users, et cetera, right? And, we have a couple other verticals as well that are building out, but all encompassing. I think like the technology here on Arbitrum is very sound. It's been battle hardened. It's been stress tested over the last several years. And that basically again, like all encompassing, like brought over not only the builders, but the users, which in turn, right, brought the liquidity over. Now we sit at this hub, if you will, of liquidity, right? It's like, there's more bridged Ethereum to Arbitrum than there is every single other L2 combined. That's a literal fact. You can go to L2B and look at that. So, the developers want to come here. The liquidity wants to come here. And I think it's, again, a true testament to the technology stack that is Arbitrum.
Yeah. And when we decided to go over to Arbitrum, to launch over there at the standard, it was we were just welcomed with open arms, and the community is just so open and connect here and connect there, and maybe we can do this together. And it's just been a big pleasure. So I definitely recommend, if you're building something in the crypto or blockchain space, come and check out Arbitrum and launch over there, because purely of that connection. And a lot of, again, it comes down to network effects. A lot of the growth or the success of any startup, like whether you're in the crypto space or not, one of the best things you can do is sort of incorporate a little bit of B2B in your business model, where you start to partner with other businesses or protocols to basically gain, sort of cross-pollinate each other's communities a little bit more. And that's definitely happened on Arb. So that's really fantastic.
That's great to hear too, man. It's like it's a reoccurring theme that we, not only have heard from actual, people coming over to the chain itself, but just from regular folks that have been building here for a while, right? And it's like Arbitrum is a very collaborative type of blockchain, right? Where even if folks, at first glance maybe think like, I'm not sure I could work with with this platform or protocol, et cetera, but they're still down to have like a discovery call. And then in that discovery call, you may uncover like a different avenue to work together, or somebody on the call might be like, hey, you can't work with us, but I have like a friend who's building this who I think you could actually work with, right? And I think that also goes to what we were talking about before with the network effects, like not only in terms of liquidity, but users, but also and engineers and developers and founders, right? Like having that echo chamber, if you will, of folks building on Arbitrum and being like a close knit type community in that sense.
Yeah. you guys recently had quite a large airdrop to people using Arbitrum. How did that go? You want to give people the story of that? What happened there? How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, so the actual airdrop itself to the users, right? Because there was two parts of it. We did it to the DAOs and then to the users as well. There's about 630,000 eligible addresses or so. Obviously, the snapshot was took or taken, whatever the grammatical correct is there. Yeah, so yeah, there was a date, the snapshot got took, taken, whatever, and and then people, if you actually went and you were eligible for the airdrop, there was a set of criteria or parameters that you had to be met, and then as you clipped some of these parameters, so you got, I think there was out of 7, so you got like 2 out of 7, you've got 2,000 coins, 3 out of 7, it scaled up from there, right? And in doing that, I think it was a very fair distribution, right? Because the more you did on the Arbitrum network, the more coins that you got. And I think that is fair in the sense of, okay, well, if I only dig a little hole, then I can't plant my plant. But if I dig a bigger hole, then I can plant my plant and it'll sprout. Horrible comparison, I guess. But that's kind of like where, the thought process was. And, I think, we did the airdrop itself, I think at its height, if you did all 7 steps, at the all-time high price, I think it was, a little over $15,000. It's a fair airdrop, right? And I think that's one of the cool things about crypto as well, are these airdrops where, you can literally start from zero. Not zero, right? You need a little bit of starting capital, but more or less close to zero, and work your way up, right? And I guess in regards to the DAO airdrop that we did, that was we didn't actually give the rule set out of who was eligible and things of that nature, but basically it was, you were building on that network for quite some time, and it kind of scaled linearly, if you will, for the products that we're building. And it really was, a lot of people ask me, like, why'd those guys get a grant? And it's like, there wasn't a grant at all. It wasn't a grant. It wasn't, there was literally no rules that were associated with these tokens. It was for the DAOs and their respective communities. And in saying that, it's exactly what's kind of happening, which I kind of foresaw, right? And they're using it to grow their protocol on Arbitrum, and whether that be through actual like liquidity mining incentives, right, on the actual platform, whether it be, they just actually distributed, the DAO airdrop out to the DAO users. Some folks are actually just holding on to it because their communities want to participate in governance, right? So there was, again, no rule set, and people got to, DAOs, I should say, got to kind of basically do, exactly what they wanted to it, right? We wanted them to engage with their respective communities. They all kind of make an informed decision, and that's what they did.
Hey, tell me something. One thing that's always confused me with airdrops, or not confused me, but I always wonder how, and I'd be interested how you guys dealt with it. When these protocols do an airdrop, how do you stop just massive selling pressure when people get this stuff? And I get, for Arbitrum, it was already a very big name, so it was less likely because people want to hold, because but if there's a new project and they do an airdrop and then people just get it and they just dump it, and basically rug pull, if there's a better word, more like take all the liquidity that the protocol might have sitting in these liquidity pools. How do you get around? And did you guys see much like selling pressure when the airdrops happened?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And I think no matter what, when you distribute a large amount of anything, really, right, it's going to be used in some fashion. That's kind of just thermodynamics, right? How energy works. It's just keeps going. But I mean, in saying that, I don't particularly pay attention to the price of the token or anything of that nature. But no, we did see a lot of folks hold on to it. I think a lot of folks were excited to actually participate in Arbitrum governance, and that's something that definitely proud of putting together. Right, it is, if you go look at our snapshots, it's not just 3 token holders that are deciding the vote, right? Like it's an actual democratized aspect of the Arbitrum ecosystem is its governance. And yeah, I mean, obviously the only quote unquote utility right now for the Arbitrum blockchain is, or Arbitrum token, I should say, is the governance, right? But hope to see some folks extrapolate that out, right? You already see it in some money markets, things of that nature. We have the Orbit chains that we just announced last week. If somebody wanted to, they could make the gas token on their Orbit chain, Arbitrum. So I think, there's a lot of use cases that have still yet to come. Yeah, but as it sits right now, it's like pure governance. Folks are, actively participating in those governance proposals, forums, things of that nature. And I would direct your audience to go actually check it out, because it's a very diverse group of folks that are chatting about a very diverse group of topics, I should say.
Yeah, so I want to get into some a bit more controversial stuff, I guess. Just to see, it would be really good to get your take on it. I think it was like a couple of weeks ago we saw processing stop because of the was it the coordinator? No, what's it called?
Sequencer.
The sequencer, yeah. You mentioned people voting and stuff. What are people starting to put stuff forth or proposals forth to remove the sequencer or to slowly supersede that with a different mechanism?
Yeah, I mean, really good question. And so it's funny enough, like the sequencer did not run out of gas. That was just the narrative that took hold to our conversation before network effects. That's what the narrative was beforehand, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in saying that, the Arbitrum DAO does have the governance power to remove the sequencer and replace it with something else. Now, what that is to be replaced with, I don't think that it currently exists, right? The core architecture of Arbitrum 1 is that sequencer, right? However, in saying that, they could vote to add another. They could vote to remove off chains, then add their own. That's really the power of what the DAO has. Like the chain ownership is the DAO, right? Like they could vote on a number of topics, chain upgrades, protocol fees, the whole 9 yards. So to answer your question, yes, they could vote to remove it, but without an actual backup plan in place, I wouldn't see how that would be beneficial for everybody involved.
Yeah, I guess we see the same sort of thing with IOTA. The IOTA team, they have this coordinator in place that sort of does a similar thing, I guess, in a little way. And it's a struggle, to try and find a right technology to take over that. I do see the stuff that I've been reading coming from some of the research in Arbitrum looks really, really promising of how to decentralize that out. I'm really excited to see that evolve. And I guess when I was saying, do they vote? It would be more, hey, there's a paper written, a technical paper about how to do this, and then start to implement things onto a test network and see how we can, slowly decentralize, to use that common word in this space, that aspect of Arbitrum. But for those that are worried about that, I see this is the wonderful thing about linking back to Ethereum, is that it's just such a solid. It's just a little component that when you see it by itself, you think, oh, that's a really big centralizing factor. But actually, if you zoom out and see it in the whole ecosystem, it's not really, because it is a single aspect on the layer 2, and everything layers back using the optimistic concepts onto main chain. So it's not the biggest issue. I would still, I think it's something that we should aim towards as a community, to slowly disseminate.
No, I completely agree, and I think that's another reason why democratize the chain ownership, the DAO incorporation, the whole 9 yards, was that path, one could say, towards decentralization in the aspect. And really, I mean, in terms of the sequencer, right? Like, it is maintained, by the the Arbitrum Foundation. The governance does have the power to select new sequencers, to remove the current one, etc. But really, the only risk, I guess one could say, that is involved with the sequencer is that it does have the ability to delay a user's transaction by up to 24 hours, reorder the transactions over a short time horizon, but ultimately it cannot compromise the system's safety or prevent any transaction from ultimately actually being executed. So in terms of and obviously there's that centralization aspect of it as well. But again, in saying this is the evolution of what maybe is the best word for it, of a young blockchain that is trying to started very centralized and is now going towards that path of decentralization, right? And the tokens, the whole DAO, its constitution was kind of that that first step, if you will.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You mentioned before voting and governance. I find, like, when I first read the Bitcoin white paper, geez, long time ago.
Over 10 years, probably, right?
Yeah, in 2011. What really struck me there was, hey, we've solved, the double spend problem. Now, in terms of DAOs, I think what we've solved there is really, it's kind of like a great mixture between some socialist ideologies and some capitalist ideologies, where you can have the ownership of a structure being owned by anybody who wants to be part of it and working for it, and or not. You don't even have to work for it. But and it's kind of a really beautiful mixture. So DAOs, I think I got the same sort of wow, fall backwards off my chair sort of thing, as I did with Bitcoin, with the concepts of DAOs. And of course, we've had lots of failed starts. The typical one is the DAO that blew up. But nowadays, they're getting more and more sophisticated. And I just want to quickly delve a little bit into how you guys are structuring your DAO. Like, how's the Arbitrum community structured? Is there are we going to use something like Nova to maybe start to get away from Discord and start to really decentralize some of the parts of DAO structures?
Say that one more time to me.
So DAOs. The trouble I see with DAOs is that there's twofold. One thing is governance. A lot of people don't rock up to vote.
Yes.
They just sort of hold the tokens and hope for the best. But the second thing is that a lot of it is based on things like Discord, which a vast majority of the shareholders of Discord is like the CCP, or or it's a centralized whatever political ideology you sit at. It is still a centralized company. Discord. I mean, it's so a lot of these DAOs using Discord. It would be really cool to start to see decentralized protocols and forums and communications mechanism messaging systems built on something like Nova that has massive throughput. Arbitrum 1 could do it for sure, which is probably even better because there's more finality there, less trust, I guess I should say. Is there steps towards heading in that direction on the Arbitrum DAO?
So I totally agree with your point, right? Like, we've seen in the past where DAOs have little to no turnout. There's like a handful of quote unquote whales that are kind of guiding the conversation, or actually making the decisions itself. And on face value, right, that situation is happening, like that's a meme, right? Like that's your DAO is a meme. It's not really a DAO. It is several large token holders that are deciding the quote unquote fate of the protocol, blockchain, whatever, right?
Yeah.
In Arbitrum's case, it was very very meticulously crafted in a way where there's these delegations, right? Like, so if I want to put a proposal through, I have to have, hold X amount of coins. The number is actually 0.1% or about 5 million. And in doing that, yes, I could accumulate 5 million coins myself, but you go to the, our delegations page, and you see all of these different types of platforms, actual individuals, different types of businesses, whether it be DeFi, NFTs, Treasure DAO is our biggest delegation, I should say. And, in doing that, and you really get a diverse amount of opinions, I guess you could say, from various walks of life. Whereas, in regards to like an actual like protocol where, only maybe a handful of folks actually own a majority of the tokens, right? Like with the Arbitrum governance right now, like it's just simply not that, right? Like when a snapshot gets posted, and a snapshot is the temperature check, right? Like all delegations are invited to vote on it, token holders, et cetera, and you can actually read back, right? Like usually you go to a DAO proposal and it's like either 100% yes or like 100% no. And on our governance forums and proposals, it's not. It's like quite the opposite, right? You have a very very mix of like yes, no, maybe on some of them, etc. And then to even build on that, right? Like for it to even go to an actual AIP, like quorum has to be reached, and quorum is about 130 million tokens. And the biggest delegation of that only holds about 8%. So it is, or 10%, I should say, because I think they're at 30 million. Whatever the number is. It's like not like 70%. You know what I'm saying? It's a good diversification of token holders that actively participate in governance and things of that nature. And in doing so, for like protocols and stuff, right? It's like they don't have a fleshed out constitution. They don't have, actual repercussions, I guess one could say, if, they don't actually follow suit on votes, things of that nature, versus, you look at governance, governance like on Arbitrum, whereas like there are these, checks and balances. There is a, to your point before, elements of socialism, elements of, republic, if you will, where, I like to say it's like Rome, in a sense, right? You have the delegation, which is like the Senate, then you have everybody else as the token holders delegating their voting power, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, but in doing so, right? Like I think some DAOs have that problem where they don't, quite frankly, like don't incentivize their token holders to come vote. And I'm not even talking about like monetarily, just like they don't actually give them the governance rights. I mean, we can look back on some projects. I won't name names, but the last couple of months where you had the DAO committee, if you will, kind of going rogue. In a sense where on Arbitrum there isn't that that centralized entity that controls majority tokens where they could go rogue. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think that's really key. And moving forward, no one really knows how to build the perfect DAO yet, but all of these things that we're seeing, whether they're rogue or not, are all lessons towards the concept and takeaways in the community. Just like the ICO boom and everything, people started afterwards to see, I'm not doing that again. I'm not investing in that sort of style again.
It's funny you say that. Actually, I was, like I said, I was right before this. I was on another. I was actually at a Discord community call for one of our protocols. We were talking about governance, and we spoke pretty much the same exact conversation. Whereas, like even though they've been probably a net negative, some of these DAOs in terms of how they operate, how they vote, etc. It's still experimenting, right? And it needs to be done, whether it's malicious or not, in that sense, right? Because then there's precedent set. You could look back and say, okay, they did it that way. It doesn't work. Let's not do it that way. And that's another big thing in crypto, right? It's like there's not a bunch of precedent at all, right? So a lot of this stuff is super experimental. It's very new. And quite frankly, right, like you and I are like building like the actual, the foundation has been built. Now it's like the first floor, right, of a house, right? We're building out the first floor so that the second floor can get built.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, if you just look at DeFi farming, for instance, you get some of these pools were offering, 100, 200% APR, and people were like, wow, I'm going to put my money in that. But very quickly they realize, oh, well, the inflation of 200% for everybody is so much that it basically is null and void. So I'd rather go with a small APR of 30% or 15% and actually have some gains, because the inflation isn't destroying the gains. And so these sorts of lessons are being learned every day, and that's just one front. And as we move forward, I think consensus, fashions and everything head towards a better system.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that's totally correct, right? Like, it's like to what I said before. Like, some of this stuff is just super experimental. Nobody's tried it, done it before, and it needs to be tried. It needs to be done, so that 10 years from now we can look back and say, okay, they did it that way, it didn't work. Let's iterate this way instead of that way.
Yeah. Last, sort of heading towards the end here, what gets you excited, Nick, for the future of Arbitrum? Where do you see the space in 5 years from now? 5 years is an eternity.
I was gonna say, man.
Let's say 2.
5 weeks. 5 weeks is an eternity in this space. But yeah, I mean, great question, right? I mean, so the Arbitrum 1 blockchain, right, is battle hardened, it's battle tested. It works. We have new developers coming each and every day to develop on the platform. I think the future of Arbitrum 1, right, is in the DAO's hands. So it'll be very interesting to see how it develops itself, how the DAO develops itself into an actual governing body, if you will. As I said, it's less than 3 months old, so it's very, very new in that sense. And then on the technology side, right, like these L3 orbit chains. Just to brief your audience about that, it is 2 ways you can launch one: either permissionlessly using the AnyTrust tech stack, which is what Arbitrum Nova is built on, or licensed through Offchain Labs, the Nitro tech stack, which Arbitrum 1 is built on. But in saying that, obviously the back-end processes are all are different, but the front ends typically are the same. But in saying that, the customization aspect of the actual chain itself, app chain or blockchain, whatever you're developing, is it's almost next to none, right? Like in terms of having a custom gas token, complete customization of background infrastructure, so like node management, RPCs, blockchain explorer, the whole 9 yards. Very very customizable. It comes like prefab, if you will, and then you can like change the settings like you're playing a video game. But in saying that, I think that is I've seen a lot of interest from legacy Web2 companies, actual protocols that we know and use probably all the time, wanting to build these types of app chains. And to our point before, right, it's like very experimental. Things have to be done, people have to fail in order for it to reach that end goal of being a successful product. But again, in saying that, very excited to see the type of use cases that come out of these orbit chains, type of folks that decide to build on them, both crypto and non-crypto native. And saying that, and then the end goal for me really is like full interoperability between all of these chains, if you will, right, in terms of liquidity, just instantaneous transactions, things of that nature, right? So I mean, to answer your question as specific as possible, is just like maintaining the current tech stack and then iterating on top of it.
Yeah, and for my 2 cents is I really look forward to usability in UX becoming better and better.
Yes.
I still think MetaMask did a great leap forward, and it's still so chunky and and awful. It would be but it's the best that we got so far. There's a lot of people working on wallets and interfaces to this stuff to make it really slippery, so that people don't need to think or understand it even. They just sort of intuitively know what to do.
Yeah.
And we kind of hide all of that, layer 1, 2, 3, 4 away. And the wallet just chooses which, is it Nova, is it Arbitrum 1, which one's better? We just log in, it does it. And also build that security in for people so they don't feel scared and get those butterflies in their stomach every time they hit send, because am I doing it right or wrong?
No, I mean that's completely correct, right? And I think you're kind of seeing that now a little bit with like account abstracted wallets, meaning like, folks don't have to, remember a seed phrase. There's some social recovery aspects into that, but to your point, it has to remain, secure and safe. But in saying that, I don't expect the next, we'll say 100 million crypto users to like remember a 12-word seed phrase, right? Like to custody their own hardware wallet or things of that nature, right? I think there needs to be some, we'll call it Web 2 elements, which people are very much used to in terms of like, social recovery, things of that nature, implemented into, blockchain technology. Whereas, you can onboard, the next 100 million users because of the ease of accessibility, because of, the UX is, not putting one letter in and my funds are gone forever. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't expect the normal person to, or average person, I should say, to being not only being able to, but also wanting to custody their own funds, right? Because you see it in like traditional finance where folks just dump their money in a mutual fund. And you're like, wow, you can get superior returns elsewhere. And they're like, because I don't have to think about it, right? It's just there. I know it's there, and it's getting some sort of return, and that's it. That's all I care about. And I think there's a lot of folks like that too that will enter the crypto space, and those UX upgrades, I guess one would say, is definitely necessary for the again the next couple 100 million users of crypto.
Yeah, absolutely, especially security. I mean, the fact that we have these account-based systems like the EVM, where someone knows, if you pay someone in the local corner deli, they see what you've got like a $10,000 NFT on you right now.
It's a security risk too, right? Like
it's a security risk. Absolutely. So abstracting that away is and
100%. Well, we can always look back on the well, they'll never remember my seed phrase, but then you get the they'll never get it out of me, and it's like, well, they get the $5 wrench attack until somebody's beating the crap out of you, demanding it. You have no choice.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming on and discussing Arbitrum. I hope that our users got something out of it. If you have any questions out there, please put it in the comments below. What do you think of Arbitrum? What do you think of the technology? Where do you see it going in the future? And also, I just want to add, we're releasing the first test for the standard very, very soon, probably this evening, hopefully. So it might even be out. Yeah, it might be out by the time you see this. So go to the standard.io. You can get some test coins. It'll be running on Arbitrum Gurley as well as Sepolia test nets. So you can basically lock up some test ETH and test coins, and then come to us as well. We'll send you some test USD, and you can lock them up and mint yourself some test Euro, and see how that all works, and give us some reports back. And then we'll be launching on Arbitrum very, very soon. Mainnet, very exciting. It's been such a long road, but I do, like you said, this is definitely floor one stuff, and I'm just so looking forward to finally launching and then iterating on what we've launched and showing people what we've done.
Super stoked for your launch, man. Very, very excited. Just the proliferation, I think that's the word, of various optionality, I should say, and stable coins of choice, I think is best for the the end user. Of course, they get to transact in what they feel comfortable in and all that jazz. But
absolutely,
off record, Josh. If you need tested ETH, man, just let me know. I'll send you a bunch.
Oh man, awesome! Thank you. Yeah, it's always hard to get testnet coins.
I know, especially since they're worth some money now.
Yeah, weird, man.
What's funny? I'll leave you with this. We had like a serious internal conversation. It's just like, since it is worth money now, like when I send folks testnet ETH, is like, is that a taxable event? Like,
yeah, I know, right? What the heck? I think they need to reset the testnet more often so that it doesn't get a value, because it makes it really hard to build. Trying to scouge around for testnet coins and actually have to mine the stuff. It's not
And it's
But
funny because
anyway,
it's like paper trading, right? You should just be able to just go get like 10,000 somewhere, and then like that's that. But
yeah,
yeah,
totally. They should really be, zero worth. So you can. I think the only way to do that is really to just, knock out the blockchain and launch another one. Another step.
right.
But yeah, that's
Well,
tricky.
it's funny though. It's just like it's this is the epitome of free market, right? Permissionless
Yeah,
chains where people are free to do what they want to do, and
yeah.
if that's spinning
Ooh.
up the testnet ETH market, then then so be it.
You never know, man. You never know. You never know if they'll have value. Better collect them all.
Yeah. But no, but seriously, we have a bunch. So if you need some, just
Cool.
give us a holler.
Really appreciate that, man. I really appreciate that. Well, folks, give us a thumbs up, a like, all that stuff. You know what to do. Until next time, see you around.